This press release states, if you ever wanted to build a deck around an Egyptian god card but didn't know where to start, look no further than the Egyptian god decks. This is not where you should start. What's going on, guys? It's Cimo. So I didn't really have high expectations for the Egyptian God structure decks. I mean, Konami's no stranger to milking Yu-Gi-Oh's most iconic characters as much as humanly possible to squeeze every last cent out of their casual market imaginable. But today, I really just wanted to do a deep dive as to what my biggest gripes are with this product and how Konami can improve upon this for the future so that we can avoid this from happening again. So I feel we should start the discussion with, what should a structure deck actually be? A structure deck is a pre-constructed deck that is advertised as being playable right out of the box, but I think that is a tremendous stretch in most instances. It really depends on your definition of the word playable. Now, a structure deck is tailored for more intermediate to advanced players, right? Compared to a starter deck, which is more beginner-oriented. Starter decks are focusing on teaching players about normal summon, special summon, different types of cards like continuous spells, counter traps, and the like. Structure decks are assuming that you already know how to play the game and are giving you a much more elevated experience in that regard. Now, one of the odd things about Yu-Gi-Oh! Structure decks specifically is that they're almost meant to be purchased in groups of 3, so instead of it really being like a $10 purchase, it's a $30 purchase, because most of the highly desirable cards in the set are only given to you at 1 copy per deck, so therefore, if you buy 3 decks, you now have 3 copies of everything. I don't really know why Konami does this. I guess a $10 buy-in is an easier sell than a $30 buy-in, so that way if you want to go all in and actually spend the 30 bucks, that's more for someone who's committed, but for someone who might be having to ask their mom for the money, it might be easier to get 10 bucks out of her than 30. It's a bit contradictory to the whole playable out of the box concept though, because again, it depends on your definition of playable. I would argue that most players who are looking to play Yu-Gi-Oh! In any sort of actual capacity would not consider these structure decks to be playable right out of the box. Now, if you were to buy 3 of these structure decks, then that actually changes the dynamic quite a bit. The Monarch structure deck, for instance, is actually revered as one of, if not the best structure deck of all time. And the reason for that is you could actually buy 3 of that product and actually have a competitive deck that has actually seen tier 1 success when it was in its prime. There are multiple accounts from back in that time where people would actually just pick up 3 of that structure deck and play in a locals and win against some of the best decks in that format because the Monarch structure deck was just that powerful. Now you might be thinking, Cimo, the Monarch deck's a bit of an exception, right? Because it doesn't really need an extra deck, and most, if not all, modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks use the extra deck in some capacity. Yes, while that may be true, the Shaddoll structure deck was bundled with almost every single fusion monster that the Shaddoll deck plays, including reprints of Winda and Construct, which are 2 of the main power cards for the deck, and even included the Shaddoll Link monster, even if it isn't really that good. It shows that Konami has the capacity to print decks like this if they absolutely want to. The Salamangreat structure deck is another great example here, because although it was missing a few core pieces such as Sunlight Wolf, it had most of the makings of what would ultimately become a tier 1 Salamangreat deck. They even printed Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, one of the most competitive staples of all time, in this structure deck at common, so you know this deck sold out everywhere. So now that we've proven that Konami is capable of making good structure decks, this now brings us to the Egyptian God structure decks, and they're not great. This isn't a full spoiler of everything that's going to be in these decks. We have both the Slifer and the Obelisk one here. We'll get to the Obelisk one in a moment, but this is about 75 to 80% of what we can expect to be in this deck. And when you're talking about a deck that is playable right out of the box, is this what you were envisioning for an Egyptian God structure deck? Because I wasn't. Now, as you can see here, the first 5 or 6 cards from each of these decks are actually exclusive to that specific deck. However, one card in particular, the Quick Play spell, which allows you to tribute your opponent's monsters to summon a divine beast, is available in both decks. And a lot of people argue that this is like the best card for the Egyptian God support. So luckily, you're not gonna have to only pick up one of these decks. You can pick up either one and be happy with that. Another positive of these decks is the fact that both the Slifer and the Obelisk structure deck come with a copy of Harpy's Feather Duster. Harpy's Feather Duster is a card that has not really had many many reprints and is actually about a $10 to $15 card, so getting a reprint of this is very nice for anyone who never managed to pick one up prior to it being unbanned a few ban lists ago. But when it comes to the good things I have to say about these decks, that really just about covers it, because looking at the rest of the contents of both the Slifer as well as the Obelisk deck, there really isn't that much to be excited about. I mean, the fact that we're reprinting Nimble Mamanga in 2021 should tell you how long and hard they thought about what should go in these structure decks. Now, I understand that Nimble Mamanga is a card that when it's destroyed by battle, you get to summon 2 more of them. Yes, that could make for tribute fodder. I feel like there's a better way they could have gone about doing that than reprinting Nimble Mamanga in 2021. And a lot of this is nostalgia driven, right? I mean, the fact that they're making Egyptian god structure decks in the first place and plastering Obelisk and Slifer everywhere they can should pretty much give you the red flag that this is not necessarily going to be the best product in terms of quality. But when you look at some of the other individual cards, I mean, Monster Reborn, Brain Control, Call of the Haunted, these are cards that are good, but also just very reminiscent from the anime. Even the Slifer deck is like slightly Yugi aligned, playing cards like Breaker the Magical Warrior, Swords of Revealing Light. Even Mirror Force is in the Slifer deck, but it's not in the Obelisk deck. Even you see stuff like cloning, paying homage to stuff like Kaiba for the Obelisk deck. So like, it makes sense that some of these cards are in here, but at the same time, I feel like they just could have done a better job picking which specific individual cards were going in these decks to give it a more cohesive feel. But instead, people get to look forward to Nimble Mamanga, Bazoo the Soul Eater, and Cyber Dragon reprint in 2021. Again, I understand that this is a more casually oriented product, and I guess it also bundles in the collectors as well who really like the Egyptian gods, but that kind of begs the question, why can't we have the best of both worlds? To me, it just seems like these decks were a real missed opportunity to be able to do something really awesome with the Egyptian gods, which are a timeless piece of Yu-Gi-Oh's history. Imagine if instead you create entire archetypes that are specific to Obelisk, or specific to Slifer, or maybe just specific to the Egyptian gods in general. Imagine if every card in these decks were actually brand new cards that had never been seen before. Here's an idea. You can make it so that since you're playing this deck, you're not allowed to use your extra deck because you're focused on tribute summoning, so that's taking a page out of Monarch's book, but you're able to make some very pushed, powerful cards as a result because you're playing without an entire mechanic of the game, and there's cards that are similar to the Vassals, the Edias, the Idoses of the Monarch deck, but they're specifically tailored to the Egyptian gods specifically and come with their own sets of effects to actually make them a somewhat viable competitive strategy. Could you imagine if players could take their competitive Obelisk or Slifer deck to locals and go toe-to-toe with decks like Tri-Brigade, like Drytron, like Dragon Link, and actually do reasonably well against them? Do you know how good that would be for the game if you told people that Obelisk and Slifer were like a tier 1 or tier 2 strategy? How would that not get people excited to play the game again? I remember back to the Shining Victories days when Blue Eyes was like a tier 1 deck for the time span of a month. Do you know how excited people were to bust out their old Blue Eyes cards, get a hold of the new ones, and actually play Blue Eyes at locals, which is something that's never really happened before in competitive capacity because the deck never had the resources to be able to do that. But it was able to fuse the casual, the collector, and the competitive player all into one and make it so that it was appealing to all pillars of the types of players that exist. Now, what's fascinating is the OCG actually never got these structure decks. They actually got what is known as the Prismatic God Box, which already sounds like the coolest name for a product ever, but within each of these boxes that were specifically decorated for their respective god, each box contained one copy of that god and a special rarity that you could only get in the Prismatic God Box. You got a plaque that you could mount the card within and actually then display the card on either your desk or maybe a wall, a pack of sleeves that was of the respective god's color that were holographic sleeves only available within that box, and several packs of the special Prismatic God Box packs, which contained a lot of these cards that are the specifically new cards we are receiving in these structure decks. For me personally, and maybe I'm in the minority here, but I would much rather have the Prismatic God Box be the way that these cards were introduced to us TCG players compared to these structure decks that, let's be honest, any of us could go dig through the bulk in our closet and probably pick out the exact cards that they chose for this. Actually, you know what? I take that back. You could probably build a better deck if you did that because you'd have way more options available because you wouldn't have to play specific one-ofs that they gave you. I think that's just what bothers me about this product the most, is that it just seems like the biggest missed opportunity to do something something incredibly exciting, especially because the God cards are like in the top echelon of most iconic Yu-Gi-Oh monsters ever, right up there with Dark Magician and Blue Eyes White Dragon. And it feels like they just squandered the opportunity because they're resting on their laurels, knowing that if they slap Slifer and Obelisk on just packs of structure decks, that people are going to go out and buy them in mass because of the massive nostalgia bait that they're going for. Why do you think we've had Blue Eyes White Dragon and Dark Magician tins like 7 times over at this point? It's because they know people are going to buy it, they're going to sell out of it, and they know it doesn't matter how good the product is, so they can be lazy. And I feel like that is just such a disservice to the player base, not just from the competitive side of things. I know I'm more of a competitively oriented person, but even for the casual and the collector audience as well, they could have done so many cool things to make this product just a really huge hit. But unfortunately, it's still gonna sell. People are gonna drive in droves to their local game store or big box store, and these are gonna sell out because it's Egyptian gods, right? Like, the amount of emotional weight that these cards carry for fans of the Yu-Gi-Oh anime, these boxes could be empty. They could have taken out every single common card in these decks and just had Slifer and like the 5 new cards that come with it, and that was it, and people would still buy it because that's the power these cards have with how iconic they are for Yu-Gi-Oh players. But it just feels like the opportunity was completely squandered when they could have done something really, really incredible, and I think that's just where I'm the most disappointed. Again, my expectations weren't the highest when it came to this product, but I think my expectations were a little bit higher than fucking Nimble Mamanga. So guys, that's gonna do it for the video. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think, because I would really love to hear your thoughts about these Egyptian God structure decks. I know I can be overly critical at times, but that's because I care so much about the longevity of this game, and I like to give as much constructive feedback as possible, because I feel like as consumers, we can demand more of Konami, and I feel like they should be putting in a little bit more effort when it comes to some of these products, because imagine what could actually be possible if they did care, and unfortunately, it looks like this is one of those times where they just didn't. But that's gonna do it for the video, you guys. If you are gonna plan on buying any cards or decks as a result of watching this video, be sure to use my affiliate links down in the description, because Cimoooooooo saves you 5% off if you do so, so you might as well get them for a little bit cheaper because it's free, so why not? Thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to like the video as always, subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content, and if you found this video helpful, consider supporting me on Patreon for exclusive early one-day access to both the history of Yu-Gi-Oh and the Yu-Gi-Oh progression series. Thanks so much again, and we will see you next time.